Good morning, everyone. Lots going on as usual. Today is, oh my gosh, what day is it? Monday, December 1st, 2025. Have you started your Christmas shopping yet? Today's Cyber Monday, so probably a good time to get your shopping done. Although the sales, I don't know, man, is Black Friday, Cyber Monday a thing of the past? Have you found any just unbelievable sales, or are the era of unbelievable sales is over? I don't know. I genuinely don't know. It seems different this year. Just seems kind of different. Although again, yesterday I heard a big number like, 10% increase of Black Friday sales. So maybe it's just my little circle. Who knows? The USMCA is facing public hearings, and that's not good for some Canadian businesses. And a huge amount of our economy relies on this agreement. So if it doesn't go through, or if there are changes to the USMCA for whatever reason, and a lot of the Canadian economy doesn't qualify anymore, there's going to be interesting fallout, if you ask me. The KTT yesterday, at the end, I was getting kind of frustrated. And Valerie, I hope that, I apologize. I hope I didn't get too upset with you. It was more frustration with everybody else. But I said yesterday that money, at the end of the show, I was saying money's fake. It's all fake. They don't care. And what I meant by that is, because I don't think I really fleshed it out, and I want to. What I meant by that is the money is a control mechanism that they use to control us. And if their foot soldiers don't get held legally responsible for violent crimes. They won't be held responsible for money crimes. They won't be held responsible for their debts. They can borrow money and do whatever the heck they want with it and send it back to whatever country they came from, and so on and so forth. They can do anything they want with it. They won't be held responsible. And so, and the money being fake, the money being lent to us is, we have to pay interest on it, and it's all funny money. Anything we do, we're playing into their hand. And my frustration is we keep playing their game by their rules and losing, and surprised that we lose. And we think if we persevere, we'll get it one day. And like, I've worked on things where if you do something wrong and persevere at doing that thing incorrectly, you will not generate results. Over time, you just work hard to get nowhere. And I feel frustrated because I've done that. Because sometimes learning requires you to work hard and get nowhere, and then look into why you're getting nowhere to see if maybe changing your strategy is a better idea. Because like, doing nothing and doing this yields the same result. So I need to change what I'm doing to get a different result. And I feel like the truckers got a different result, right? It's not like we can't do anything, but what we are doing is incorrect. And not just you, Valerie, everybody. Right? What everybody's doing in Canada is incorrect. And it seems like we're all playing one game, thinking it's going to yield a result. And as I said yesterday, I'm playing tennis and I serve the ball and he gets the point. And how does that work? Right? The game is rigged. I'd rather not play. And so that's what I'm saying. I would rather strategize well and bring something to bear that's actually going to move the needle than do something over and over again that's going to take up energy and all sorts of other stuff that yields no result, right? Like, and so I didn't mean to be upset, but it is frustrating. This whole thing is frustrating, and it's meant to be, right? So apologies that I yelled at anybody at the Kitchen Table Talk in a way that is mean. I didn't mean it in that way. I'm not trying to be mean. I'm just frustrated because this whole thing is so crazy, and it's so obviously crazy to me that it bears talking about. And I do this show as a comedy show. I do this show as kind of a, like, can you believe this? But as time's gone on, things are getting serious, and they're going to get more serious, and that's not so good either, right? Anyway, I wanted to address that, so there we go. Carney's conflict of interest is still bubbling. The Conservatives are trying to do something about it, but is there going to be any kind of meaningful reform? I don't think so. I'm not heartened by these movements. I wonder why the Conservatives are still participating in this illegitimate government. The elections are rigged. Biden's government imported millions of illegals to vote, and they have the proof to back this up. I've got Trump's guy talking about this. So take it with a grain of salt, but as you take everything with a grain of salt, please. I think that maps onto what Canada's doing and what a whole bunch of other countries are doing, including Japan. And I've got Hungary. Hungary's protesting, or Viktor Orban's talking about it. Japan's protesting. All sorts of interesting stuff going on with regards to this plan. I've got an example using Somalia. And Trump is threatening to remove Ilhan Omar from Congress and deport her because she married her brother. And he says if she did that, she should be kicked out of the country. She should be stripped of her congressional whatever and kicked out of the country. Physical silver is the reason for the price bump over the weekend. They panicked because somebody called in a whole bunch of paper silver. So they owned a bunch of paper silver and they said, I want to actually hold that. They saw the show and they were like, oh my gosh, I own paper silver. So they called in their silver thing and that caused the spike. That's what it is, according to this guy that I'm going to show you, a tweet that I saw. So take it with a grain of salt. And $2 trillion invested in the UAE from our pensions. Yes, says Carney. He can't wait to give our pension money to the United Arab Emirates. Woo! So lots to get to. Let's get to it. First, Savage says, I'm sick. This is a meme. And I scrolled past this meme yesterday and I thought, yeah, like I'm done. I'm sick and tired of this crap and it needs to stop. I'm sick of having my paycheck taxed nearly in half and then paying taxes on everything I buy only to see it sent to other countries to solve their problems while we inch closer to the cliff. Yep, for sure. Why are we sending Canadian pension money to the United Arab Emirates to the tune of $2 trillion? What? And already the WEF is managing our pension. Unbelievable. Real Robert says, conspiracy theory no more. Stephen Miller says the Democratic Party. Well, this is the explanation of the scam that I was talking about. Bringing in illegals to solidify a vote for the Democrats for their political party. Here we go.
It's it for your audience perfectly, Sean. This was not a loophole. The Biden administration, Secretary of Homeland Security, Alejandro Mayorkas, devised a scheme to fly illegal aliens into the country and then to escort them en masse across the border by the millions and to give them something known as parole, which gives them a work permit, which gives them a social security number, which gives them access to the voting booth. This was the plan all along, to get them here illegally so they can get free government benefits, get hooked to welfare, and be able to participate in American elections. This was an attack on democracy by the Democrat Party. It's the same attack that we see, Sean, when you have California, a sanctuary state, that is refusing to turn over even illegal alien criminals and gang members to ICE. So these are illegal aliens in California who have been arrested by California police, by California law enforcement for serious crimes, for crimes against children, for felonies, for crimes that threaten public safety, and they are refusing to hand these criminal illegal aliens over to ICE. Instead, they're freeing them back into the cities to offend and offend again. By any definition, what California is doing is criminal. It is a violation of our laws. It is one of the most heinous things that I have seen in my entire...
Okay, so this is what they're doing. The Biden-Harris administration brought people in, got them on parole, which added them to the voter rolls and gave them access to welfare, government payment in exchange for votes. And then he pivoted to California. This is all very illegal. And another subculture, Somali subculture, was used to bring in the necessary numbers. So a group was targeted in Somalia, or the country of Somalia was targeted, in order to bring in the numbers needed in order to make the vote viable. And that resulted in a lot of fraud. And so it seems, and I saw, it's hard to tell what's true, what's real and not real these days, because Trump says crazy things and is hilarious. He's really funny. And sometimes he's joking, sometimes he's not. Sometimes it's AI, sometimes it's not. This I believe to be true. I still don't know if the other one from the other day was true. I have no idea. So again, grain of salt. But I saw other reports that said Trump is going to deport Ilhan Omar, who's a Somali from Minnesota. And so then I saw this and I thought, this maps, holy cow. So I had a couple of things, but this is the only one I kept for Trump deporting Ilhan Omar and removing her from Congress. And here's Trump talking about Ilhan Omar. Here we go.
Frankly, don't need their people coming into our country telling us what to do.
When you talk about
I'm talking about like Somalia, where you have a congressman goes around telling everybody about our Constitution, and yet she supposedly came into our country by marrying her brother. Well, if that's true, she shouldn't be a congressman, and we should throw her the hell out of our country. Frankly, don't need their people.
Right? So, I mean, like, I think that's true. Eric is what is he? chief content officer at FL Voice News, 750,000 followers, I think. Yeah, 750,000 followers. So again, take everything with a grain of salt because the internet is crazy and getting crazier. The AI, everybody can make an AI video 15 seconds long is a weird thing to happen to reality, right? So have your head on a swivel and be skeptical about things, right? But interesting, and we'll see. I'll follow that story to see if that actually happens. Trump again says we've got to get bad people out of the country and fast. What the Biden administration and a rigged election did to the United States of America must never be forgotten. Make America great again. So yeah, are we going to see any kind of anybody put in prison for the criminality? Because I think bringing people in and bribing them with government welfare, same thing, government money, and in exchange for votes and citizenship or de facto citizenship, that's probably really illegal. Nobody's going to be held accountable for that. Everything's just going to kind of roll on. How corrupt is the justice system in the United States for the communist globalists? In Canada, it's almost completely turned for this group of globalists who think that they know how to run the world and they have all the solutions, and the only thing getting in their way are people who are skeptical of their obvious solutions. And if they're skeptical, they're not giving over their money, and obviously that's the problem. Anyway, Minnesota Department of Human Services says Tim Walz is 100% responsible for massive fraud in Minnesota. We let Tim Walz know of fraud early on, hoping for a partnership in stopping fraud, but no, we got the opposite response. Tim Walz is the governor. I think he's the governor of Minnesota, and he was Kamala Harris's vice presidential running mate. Anyway, Tim Walz systemically retaliated against whistleblowers using monitoring, threats, repression, and did his best to discredit fraud reports. Instead of partnership, we got the full weight of retaliation by Tim Walz, certain DFL members, and in indifferent mainstream media. It's scary, isolating, and left us wondering who we can turn to. And I think this, again, is part and parcel of the playbook that they use to roll out their plans, right? Minnesota is a blue state. I could be wrong here, but I believe Minnesota had police with paintball guns walking up and down streets, shooting homeowners who were sitting outside during COVID. So that's pretty crazy stuff, right? So if he was the vice president, can you imagine the policies that we'd be under now, right? Yikes. And not we, but the United States. And if the United States is doing that kind of stuff, well, Mark Carney loves that idea. In addition to retaliating against whistleblowers, Tim Walz disempowered the Office of the Legislative Auditor, allowing agencies to disregard their audit findings and guidance. Media and politicians supporting Walz or the DFL agenda attacked whistleblowers who were trying to raise red flags on fraudulent activities. This is a cascade of systemic failures leading up to Tim Walz. Agency leaders appointed by Tim Walz willfully disregarded rules and laws to keep fraud reports quiet, even to the extent of threatening families of whistleblowers. These same leaders are not qualified for their jobs instead of getting leadership jobs via Tim Walz's friendship. So state governments were left floundering. DFL lawmakers refused to acknowledge fraud and deflected any serious conversations to stop fraud. Biased mainstream media such as WCCO and NPR, showed absolutely no interest in covering fraud happening in our own state. Programs, especially in behavioral health and disability services, were built without any guardrails against fraud, and in an attempt to extract more funding from legislative and federal government. As staff, we firsthand witnessed and observed fraud happening, yet we were shut down, reassigned, and told to keep it quiet. Sometimes more leadership did not want to appear to discriminate against certain communities and were unwilling to take action, such as stopping fraud, that would have had adverse impact on their image. To date, no single agency leader has been held responsible for their role in fraud, whether it's, and then she names leaders. It is a structure created and maintained by Tim Walz, who has created an environment of interrelated agencies and institutions, including the media, that help foster fraud through retaliation and turning a blind eye in exchange for political gain in the form of high-power agency leadership jobs or other perks. Fundamentally, Tim Walz is dishonest, lacks ethics and integrity, has poor leadership abilities, and has never taken any accountability for his role in fraud. Instead, Tim Walz deflects by blaming national policies for his own failings and distracts the public with with lies. These lies include his reference of a budget surplus under his tenure. Fact is, Minnesota never had a surplus. We've been given federal ARPA funds that were conflated as surplus money. Otherwise, we'd be in a deficit. And those ARPA funds, which were meant to be temporary funds, were used to create more leadership positions for Tim Walz's buddies. As such, we can't fight fraud in Minnesota alone, hence why we're appealing to the federal levels of government. We need all the help we can get, as Tim Walz's agency leaders have upped their brazen approach in covering it up and covering up their knowledge of fraud. We are grateful to numerous solid politicians, especially the Fraud Committee and media outlets who are trying to halt the fraud. We are also grateful to other whistleblowers who are bravely stepping up. So this is the modus operandi. This is what they do. All of the stuff that's kind of explained here, where they talk about how people in the justice system turn a blind eye to any serious conversations, are shut down. All of these things happen here in Canada if you want to start discussing anything that goes against the liberal agenda. And if you say, hey, like these land acknowledgements are actually racist because they imply guilt by like your skin color. Like you can't do that to people. That's racist and goes against our code of conducts and like, I think it goes against laws, but anyway, can't do that kind of stuff, but they want to because it's their ideology. They want to continue doing it because their ideology demands it, right? Here's Catherine, and this is happening in the United Kingdom. This is unverified as AI. This is not unverified, as AI says. The issue of $2 million or £2 million council houses going to Somalis who have never paid a penny in tax was raised in 2011 by the Telegraph and again in 2016 by the Daily Mail. So jobless Somali refugee family was rehoused from a $2 million mansion to a $1.3 million semi. So pretty crazy stuff. Why are Somalis so good at getting government handouts in England and the United Kingdom? And is the same happening in Canada with Somalis or any other population? I think yes. I think absolutely. And there are people who are in hotels on the Canadian tax dollar dime who absolutely shouldn't be, I don't think. And it's pretty wild. It's pretty wild that it happens. Here is England talking about this, and the concern in England is the rights of the people who are coming in, who are largely criminals, and Lowe is talking about people who have actually acted in a criminal way in England, I think, already. So here we go.
Please spare me the continued moral outrage. I am bored of it. The British people are bored of it. It is not cruel to deport criminals. It is not inhumane to defend our own citizens. What is cruel and what is inhumane is allowing foreign killers and sex offenders to walk amongst us in the name of the human rights they should have forfeited the moment they committed their crimes. Please spare me.
Right? So absolutely very interesting. Spare me the moral outrage, you lunatics. Here is Viktor Orban, and he says, here's a quote: "Migration is a concept of changing society. It is the replacement of native-born voters. This is the left's plan. Not just the United Kingdom, not just Minnesota, but all of the United States. And not just those two countries, Hungary too, probably the broader EU, Canada too, probably Ireland, actually, definitely Ireland, right? New Zealand, Australia, all of these places are falling to this cracked ideology of we're just going to bring in voters and we're going to pay them and they're going to vote for the liberals because the liberals, or the version of liberals in that country, are cutting checks to make sure this new population votes for them, because otherwise none of this would work. But it's a scam. It undermines what the democratic process and democracy itself is supposed to be. You shouldn't just be importing people from other countries to win the next election, using tax dollars to pay them off. Whew. Thomas Sowell says Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni accuses Macron of supporting mass illegal immigration into Europe. And so again, she's speaking Italian, so I'm not going to play it right now, but these patterns are undeniable and concerning and piling up. Here's Japan. Kumashan says, breaking, protests have erupted in every major city across Japan. Reasons: frustration built up by foreign crimes, fake asylum seekers taking benefits and not contributing, labor shortages being used as an excuse to bring in millions of aliens. Anyone who speaks up is called a racist or a spy, and their X account is suspended. Oh, they've already got the speech controls in Japan. The mainstream media in Japan is trying to conceal everything. Japanese people are waking up to the truth. Please like and share. So people in Japan. And I am a year ago, 2 years ago, when we saw, probably 2022, maybe it was before 2022, when we saw that the Canadian government was looking for canisters of tear gas and crowd control, et cetera, et cetera. I said, Canadians don't protest like that. And of course, here we are in 2025, and we all know what's happened since. And so things have changed a little bit. And Japanese people are very agreeable people, by and large. And if you're a not agreeable Japanese person, then don't take offense. But by and large, from what I've heard and seen, Japanese, and this is from movies, so I don't know. I know politics. I don't know homing pigeons, okay? And I've never been to Japan. But I know people who have gone to Japan, and they say the Japanese people are very agreeable. So having them protest like this seems out of character, but it illustrates just how serious the whole issue is. It's very, 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 very concerning. And to have the Japanese people out on the streets, it's a huge deal. Here is a youngin', and we're back in Canada now, and he says, these liberals seem to hate us, and they seem to hate white people, and they seem to hate everything about Canada, and we're sick and tired of this crap. So here's a little bit from the younger generation, I think well worth paying attention to.
Liberal government does not give a fuck about your life. They don't care about young people ever being able to buy a home. They don't care about white people. They're actively destroying and erasing Canadian history and culture. They push a radical pro-environment agenda. Its true purpose is to impoverish Canadians and enrich the elite globalists like Mark Carney. This is a guy that for years pushed these radical climate policies that end up hurting the people like me and you, all while overseeing Brookfield Asset Management. One of the largest investors, fossil fuels and high-emission infrastructure. They refuse to allow us to attain our own resources and sell them abroad, and instead invest in pipelines in these third worldist countries. They don't have to pay as much for the workers, don't have to worry about the red tape that we have in our country. Then raising taxes back home for us Canadians, making it impossible for us to ever get ahead in life, while using Bermuda as a tax haven to maximize his profit. Sorry, but I don't buy this environmentalist garbage when you're overseeing a global investment management firm that's releasing 159 million metric tons of carbon a year. This is all bullshit. If Mark Carney truly cared about global carbon emissions, he would allow us Canadians to access our resources, would make deals and sell these resources with countries that are in need of it. Countries like India. India still burns a tremendous amount of coal, which is way worse for the environment. Not to mention we're missing out on a huge market. They're literally sitting on a gold mine in this country. Our economy's gone to shit. Birth rates are declining, and we're pumping the country full of immigrants to make up for it. While Carney, the globalist, flies around on jet planes taking trips on your tax dollars, waiting to retire in a couple years on his big pile of money. We have the resources. We have the customers. The only thing in the way is these globalist politicians that are selling Canadians out for their own benefit and lining their pockets before they retire.
Yep. So this guy clocked it correctly, right? These people hate us, and they hate us. And there's a plan to replace us. And we should call it out, and we should stop it. And we should stop it, if not for us, for them. If we don't fix this, then it's going to be his responsibility. And then, he seems up for the fight, right? We could all band together and say, no more, guys. No more. Anyway, with that, man, we've got so much. I've got so much more, and we're already at 23 minutes. I should kill the stream, but I'm going to talk about Danielle Smith. Derek says Danielle Smith has repeatedly said that independence is a debate for Albertans and not for political parties. That's fair to a point, but she is arguing that her party should be the only party not engaged in what amounts to an existential struggle for the future of Alberta itself. And here is Feldebrand, he's responding to himself. He says Premier Smith is asking an angry army that she led onto the battlefield to now sheath their swords and trust the enemy. It's a tough ask. Yeah. And Derek is responding to himself again. He says, a few main thoughts from my column. Smith made the error of believing that the independence movement can be satisfied with some victories on the pipeline and oil production. I don't think that's necessarily it. I think that they realize that Alberta is serious about this. The opening of the independence movement in Alberta is serious, and it's polling very, very high. So the powers that be, because it's not Mark Carney, looked at that and said, we've got to throw them a bone here. How can we throw them a bone? They're going to push this pipeline through, I think, probably, so long as the carbon tax is adhered to by Danielle Smith. As the days go on, I thought this pipeline is going to be tied up in courts for a long time. I think they're actually going to build it. It looks like they're actually going to push forward with it. But the Smith made an error believing the the trade-off isn't worth it for Albertans. It doesn't address the core argument. It doesn't address any of the issues that Alberta needs to address to satisfy the separatists. $30 billion a year going to Ottawa, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so I think the powers that be said, we've got to throw them a bone. We'll throw them a pipeline. That'll be enough. And the pipeline didn't work, got booed, right? Big boos. And so now, yesterday during the AGM, they started adding, well, people were voting for these other amendments, and these amendments passed. And I don't think that, I think it's part and parcel of throwing the separatists a bone. Like, get on board. If we don't do this with Canada and work together, then it's never going to happen, right? If you separate, then there's no pipeline, which not true, right? I think probably independent Alberta makes a pipeline pretty quickly down to the United States in a couple of different capacities, probably. But I think that the powers that be recognize correctly that Alberta, the citizens of Alberta, are done, and they're not going to be screwed around with. And that's why we're seeing amendments and other initiatives being passed at the AGM, the UCP AGM, and the pipeline. That's what I think is going on there. And Food Professor says a new policy resolution passed at the UCP AGM yesterday in Alberta. Lab-grown and cloned meat would not be sold in Alberta without proper labeling, an important move for transparency in the protein sector. So lab-grown meat and cloned meat, different things, right? But it seems conflated in this sentence. Maybe it's just me. But they're different things, right? And so the cloned meat would be one way, and the lab-grown would be another way. I think the lab-grown meat uses cloned cells anyway, but I digress. But the problem with all these resolutions, as illustrated by Alberta Leonidas, says, reminder of the motions passed at the UCP's AGM, maybe 10 out of 36 will advance to any form of law. The vast majority are ignored, and only the easy stuff is usually addressed. So don't be getting excited about big policies that are being passed by the members. Most, if not all, of the big stuff will be ignored by the party, such as the anti-net zero that was passed last year, to be ignored by Smith in the memorandum of understanding a week ago. So I think good point, right? Good point. And are we going to get what we want? Probably not. Oh man, 27 minutes already, Mark P. So with that, we've got to say goodbye. Thanks for